Hey folks, so my health has taken another dip. It looks like that I'm probably going to need to go on blood pressure medication to manage my blood pressure control issues. I was planning on making a deeper video relating to Pride Month, but that's just going to have to wait. I'm not really in a good position to do that right now. So what I'm going to do instead is an open letter regarding ABA therapy and eugenics, so trigger warning for both. So this was in an environmental policy course I took this past spring. We had to write an op-ed under 700 words, I believe was the prompt. And we could pick any topic we discussed in the course, and so most of it was like electric cars and global warming and stuff. But our first lecture was on science communication and science education and science denialism, so that seemed like a reasonable position to start with. So that's the context of this article. So I'm just going to read it. We'll get back to the other stuff when I'm feeling better. Sorry again. An open letter on ABA therapy and eugenics in science. This nation once viewed left-handedness as a bad thing. Schools often forced southpaws to write with their right hands only for the entire school day. That on its own is pretty shameful, but suppose in addition to the 7 or so hours of school each day, doctors recommended lefties get 40 hours a week extra of practicing right-hand writing, starting as soon as a child could hold a crayon. This training might outright state that the way lefties write, the way their brains work and the way their bodies move is inherently bad. Or, that just may be implied from the mere fact that lefties have to do it while righties conspicuously don't. These programs might actively punish children for writing with their left hands, or they may take away something a child enjoys and make the children earn those things back through the accumulation of tokens like stickers, so many hours of right-hand practice. Suppose further that these, quote, therapists running these programs are paid tens of thousands of dollars a year to do this, and if you, as the parent of a left-handed child, may be one who thinks there's nothing wrong with your child's left-handedness, decides to stop this therapy, you may have your children taken away on the grounds of medical neglect. And when those children grow up, and when they call this practice torture, a violation of their human rights, they will be called science deniers. For this practice is the most, quote, evidence-based treatment for the, quote, disorder of left-handedness out there. While this scenario, thankfully, is not and was not the reality for the United States for lefties, an identical situation is the lived reality for millions of autistic kids right now suffering under applied behavioral analysis, or ABA, therapy. And autistic person is the preferred language. If you wouldn't say person with black, don't say person with autism. I write this as an autistic person and as an ABA survivor, but also as a biologist and biostatistician by training. I'm not here to argue whether ABA should be banned. It should, and it is to our eternal shame that my university's College of Education still teaches ABA, but rather to explore, as a scientist, how a supposedly scientifically enlightened society, seeing the absurdity in the Southpaw case, is fine with the same eugenical policy directed at us autistics. Yes, there is little doubt that ableism is a very real component. Eugenics would not persist without the systematic hatred of and discrimination against the disabled. But I want to advance a more radical hypothesis. America has too much trust in science. Nobody would dispute that science has given us many wonderful things, as Mephistopheles gave to Faust. But science, by its nature, requires evidence. Evidence is expensive to gather and requires experts like myself to analyze in all but the most trivial cases. Even in a society of angels, finite resources means somebody's experiment isn't getting funded. But if we need evidence to defend our position in a society that cares too much about, quote, trusting the science, a marginalized and systematically underemployed minority will never reasonably be able to defend itself. What are we supposed to do? Fund our own experiments if we don't want to continue to be abused? Instead, ABA survivors often rely on testimony, lived experience of the trauma we've been through to advocate for ourselves and for the next generation of autistic kids. As a statistician, lived experience makes a degree of sense. It means we probably don't have a representative sample of the truth when lived experience disagrees with our science. But good science education has trained the public to reject lived experience as unreliable. Good science education also trains the public to trust the scientific consensus, which until very recently was almost unanimous in favor of ABA. 50 years ago, the scientific consensus said homosexuality was a disease, and remnants of evidence-based racism, once consensus, can still be found in the darker corners of academia. 50 years ago, trusting the science would have meant believing that homosexuality was a disease. It would have meant accepting that blacks were inferior to whites. But fortunately for us, the homosexuals and the blacks didn't trust the science and chose to define themselves independently of it. What if we taught the public the social and philosophical limits, like the Raven paradox, of science as part of our general secondary education curriculum? Would ABA survivors be believed if people were conditioned to understand science excludes marginalized groups? Would an authoritarian government institution be able to implement any policy it desired while silencing its critics in the name of, quote, following the science? I think we'd have a healthier and more humane democracy when fewer people, quote, trust the science. It is often said, science is not democratic. Indeed, science is fascist. So that's the end of my article. Happy rest of Pride, and we'll hopefully get back to that sooner rather than later. Bye-bye.